Dangerous biblical women. The most dangerous women in the Bible, a story of power, betrayal, and redemption. In the Bible, there are many women who sinned and acted against the commandments of God. Some female characters are depicted as evil or having cruel actions. However, the judgment of evil often depends on the historical, cultural, and interpretive context of each story. Explore Catholic Knowledge would like to share with you some prominent figures often mentioned as typical dangerous and evil women in the Bible. The first character, Potiphar's wife. Potiphar is mentioned in the book of Genesis 37 verse 36 and 39:1-23, as the captain of the guard and an important officer of Pharaoh. During ancient Egypt. At the time when Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, was envied and sold into slavery by his brothers. He was purchased by Potiphar, Pharaoh's captain of the guard. Potiphar held a high-ranking position and was influential in the Egyptian court. He entrusted Joseph with managing his household because he recognized Joseph's talents and the Lord's favor upon him. Joseph was also handsome and well-built. Potiphar's wife is infamous in biblical history for attempting to seduce Joseph. The Bible portrays her as a woman driven by lust, perhaps boredom, or a desire to control others. She persistently tried to entice Joseph into adultery. This is detailed in Genesis 39. She said to Joseph, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph refused and said to her, "With me in charge. My master does not concern himself with anything in the house, everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Day after day, she spoke to Joseph. But he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day, Joseph went into the house to attend to his duties. And none of the household servants was inside. She grabbed him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out, she called her household servants and said, "Look! This Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me." But I screamed. When he heard me scream, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until Potiphar came home. Then she told him this story: "The Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph out of spite, resulting in his wrongful imprisonment. But ultimately, God used Joseph to fulfill a greater plan. While in prison, the Lord was with Joseph and granted him favor in the eyes of the warden. The warden entrusted Joseph with all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with him and gave him success in whatever he did. Joseph's time in prison turned out to be a significant turning point in his life. One night, Pharaoh had strange dreams about 7 cows and 7 heads of grain. None of Egypt's wise men could interpret the dreams. A court official mentioned Joseph's ability to interpret dreams. Joseph was summoned to Pharaoh's court, where he predicted 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine, urging Pharaoh to store food for the coming crisis. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders." Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. The wicked actions of Potiphar's wife unintentionally paved the way for Joseph's rise. He saved many lives during the 7 years of famine, including his own family. This event demonstrates how God's plans can triumph, turning even the worst intentions into opportunities for greater good and divine glory. The second character, Delilah, the betrayer of Samson. Delilah is a prominent character in the Bible, appearing in the book of Judges. She is known as a seductive yet deceitful woman who played a critical role in the downfall of Samson, a mighty judge of Israel. Samson was a Nazirite, blessed by God with extraordinary strength. The Bible says, no razor may be used on his head, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, set apart to God from birth. And he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines, Judges 13 verse 5. His uncut hair was the source of his strength. Samson fought against the Philistines, who were oppressing Israel at the time. Delilah enters the story as a woman Samson loved. However, she was allied with the Philistines, Israel's enemies, who bribed her with a large sum of money, 1,100 shekels of silver from each of their leaders, to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. Delilah began to persuade and entice Samson to reveal the truth. In the first 3 attempts, Samson deceived Delilah. 1. First attempt, Judges 16 verses 7 to 9, Samson said, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. The Philistine rulers brought Delilah the bowstrings, and she tied him with them, with men hidden in the room. She called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. 2. Second attempt, Judges 16 verse 11, Samson told her, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. 3. Third attempt, Judges 16 verses 13 to 14, Samson said, if you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man. While he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom, with the fabric. Eventually, Delilah nagged Samson until he was sick to death, Judges 16 verse 16. And he revealed the truth, his strength lay in his uncut hair. Delilah notified the Philistines. And as Samson slept in her lap, she had his hair shaved off. His strength left him, and he was captured, blinded, and enslaved by the Philistines. Delilah's personal motivations are not fully detailed. Apart from the monetary reward from the Philistines, there is no indication that she loved Samson. And her actions demonstrate that her loyalty lay with the Philistines, or perhaps solely with herself. Her betrayal led to Samson's temporary defeat and his suffering as a prisoner. He was mocked and humiliated, forced to grind grain in captivity. During his imprisonment, Samson's hair began to grow back, symbolizing the return of his strength. At a Philistine celebration in the temple of Dagon, Samson prayed to God for strength one last time. God granted his request, and Samson brought the temple down, killing himself and many Philistines in the process. The fate of Delilah is not mentioned again in the Bible. Her actions, however, serve as a key turning point in the story, highlighting themes of betrayal, deceit, and the consequences of opposing God's chosen. Delilah has since become a symbol of betrayal and manipulation. Her story teaches important lessons on vigilance, despite being endowed with extraordinary strength. Samson was vulnerable to temptation and misplaced trust. On loyalty and betrayal, Delilah represents greed and disloyalty, standing in stark contrast to values of integrity and faithfulness. On God's power, though betrayed and weakened, Samson remained under God's providence and fulfilled his divine mission in the end. Delilah remains one of the most complex female characters in the Bible, embodying both the allure and the dangers of unfaithful seduction and greed. The third character, Herodias, the vengeful queen. Herodias is a notable historical figure from the Roman era, known primarily through biblical accounts and contemporary historical records. She is often depicted in literature, art, and popular culture as a scheming, ambitious woman who wielded power ruthlessly to achieve her goals. Herodias is most famously associated with the story of John the Baptist. This section focuses on her vengeful nature. Herodias was a member of the Herodian dynasty, established by Herod the Great. She was a powerful woman who greatly influenced the political decisions of Herod Antipas. However, this influence ultimately contributed to his downfall, leading to his exile by the Romans. Herodias was the granddaughter of Herod the Great and had complex relationships with other family members through marriages. She first married her uncle, Herod Philip I, but later left him to marry Herod Antipas, her husband's half-brother. This marriage caused outrage among the Jewish people, as it was seen as a violation of religious laws. John the Baptist publicly condemned the marriage between Herodias and Herod Antipas as unlawful, inciting Herodias's anger and humiliation. She sought revenge against John. Her opportunity came during Herod Antipas's birthday celebration. Herodias instructed her daughter, Salome, to perform a dance for Herod and his guests. The dance delighted Herod so much that he promised to grant Salome anything she desired, even up to half of his kingdom. Coached by her mother, Salome asked for the head of John the Baptist on a platter, though Herod was reluctant. As he respected John, he was compelled to keep his promise in front of his guests. He ordered John's execution, and his head was brought to Salome, who then presented it to her mother. John the Baptist, known for his ascetic life and fearless proclamation of God's truth, became the victim of Herodias's vengeful plot. His execution was a tragic consequence of her ruthless ambition and hatred. Herodias did not face immediate consequences for her actions, but her later life was marked by turmoil. Her husband, Herod Antipas, faced political failure and was eventually exiled by the Roman emperor to a remote province in France. The Bible does not detail Herodias's fate after her husband's exile. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of uncontrolled anger and its devastating effects on innocent lives. The fourth character, Jezebel, the archetype of wickedness. Jezebel is a prominent figure in the Old Testament, featured in the books of 1 Kings and 2 Kings. She was the queen of Israel, married to King Ahab, and is infamous for her cruelty, deceit, and promotion of idol worship, particularly of the god Baal. Jezebel is often regarded as a symbol of wickedness and moral corruption in Jewish and Christian traditions. Jezebel was the daughter of King Ethbaal of Sidon, a city in Phoenicia where Baal and Asherah worship were prevalent. She married Ahab, the king of Israel, as part of a political alliance. This marriage introduced Baal worship and foreign rituals into Israel. Jezebel is known for encouraging Ahab and Israel to worship Baal, directly opposing the monotheistic worship of the Lord. She ordered the killing of the Lord's prophets and supported the prophets of Baal, leading to widespread idol worship in Israel. One of Jezebel's most infamous acts was orchestrating the death of Naboth to seize his vineyard for Ahab. When Naboth refused to sell his vineyard to Ahab, Jezebel devised a scheme to falsely accuse Naboth of blasphemy and treason, resulting in his execution. Ahab took possession of the vineyard, showing Jezebel's willingness to deceive and commit murder for trivial gains. Jezebel's actions drew condemnation from the prophet Elijah, who staged a dramatic confrontation with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. Elijah challenged the 450 prophets of Baal to call upon their God to consume an offering with fire. When Baal did not respond, Elijah prayed to the Lord, who sent fire from heaven, consuming the offering and demonstrating his power. The people repented and declared the Lord is God. Elijah ordered the execution of the prophets of Baal, 1 Kings 18 verses 20-40. Jezebel vowed to kill Elijah in retaliation, forcing him to flee. She continued her campaign against the faithful, creating an atmosphere of fear among God's followers. However, her reign of terror ended with a violent demise. Following Ahab's death, their son Joram became king. Joram was killed by Jehu, a military commander anointed as king. Jezebel was thrown from a palace window, and her body was consumed by dogs, fulfilling Elijah's prophecy, 1 Kings 21 verse 23. Jezebel's story serves as a warning about the consequences of unfaithfulness to God and the misuse of power. Her legacy is one of tyranny, idol worship, and moral decay. The fifth character, Athaliah, ruthless pursuit of power. Athaliah is a significant figure in the Old Testament, known for her brutality and ambition. She was the queen of Judah and is remembered as a ruthless and power-hungry ruler. Athaliah was the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, inheriting her mother's determination and cruelty. Athaliah married King Jehoram of Judah, forming a political alliance between Israel and Judah. This marriage brought Baal worship into Judah, corrupting its religious practices. After Jehoram's death, their son Ahaziah ruled Judah briefly before his death. Seizing the opportunity, Athaliah sought to secure her position by eliminating all royal heirs, ordering the massacre of the royal family. However, Jehosheba, Ahaziah's sister, saved her nephew Joash, hiding him in the temple for 6 years. Athaliah ruled Judah with an iron fist, continuing Baal worship and oppressing the people. Her reign ended in a coup led by Jehoiada, the high priest. Joash was crowned king at 7 years old, and Athaliah was executed, marking the restoration of Davidic rule in Judah. Athaliah's story illustrates the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequences of abandoning faith. Under Jehoiada's leadership, Judah returned to God, and Joash's reign symbolized the renewal of godly leadership. Conclusion. Through these 5 stories, we see familiar lessons about the dangers of power, ambition, deceit, wickedness, and apostasy. Let us seek justice and compassion in life by cultivating integrity, faithfulness, and devotion to God with all our hearts, souls, and minds. By doing so, we can avoid temptations and mistakes in life, never stray from God's commandments, and I believe you and I can live fulfilling lives, full of divine blessings. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts so we can delve deeper into the meaning of Bible stories together. Best regards.